Hello, everybody, and welcome to Series 3 of our Inspire the Mind interviews. As you know, we chat for a series of 6 interviews with people who are making waves and are full of interest in the world of mental health. And I'm really excited to have as our first guest, Jamie Laing. So Jamie and I met up because he has his own podcast about mental health called Private Matters. Have I got that right, Jamie?
You've got it. It's private parts, and you were on an episode which we like to call voicemail, which is where 2 guys, myself and Josh Roberts, we talk about things that guys typically don't talk about.
Brilliant. So in fact, that's a whole topic in itself, a sort of male mental health and why men, as you say, maybe aren't as chatty. But for those of you, I'm sure most of you already know, but Jamie is like this amazing guy on Made in Chelsea, and he's done so much of my street cred with my daughters, because basically once I said, do you know this guy called Jamie Laing? And they go, what, Jamie? And in fact, they all wanted to come out of school today to be part of the podcast. So Jamie, welcome. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. And we did our episode together and I came off it, and you are just such a warm, wonderful person. And what you're doing in this space is incredible. So I completely applaud you, and I'm honored to be on the podcast.
Oh, thank you, Jamie. Whew. You know, one of the things I've been working on in therapy for many years is just being able to accept really nice compliments like that. And
it's hard though, isn't it? It's a strange one where especially being British, we're very, very bad at accepting anything. And we tend to sometimes think that when someone is saying something nice to us, we almost have to reply with a joke. We have to sort of, we can't really accept it. We sort of use humor to
away, oh no, don't be silly. I'm no big deal. It's really interesting because I think there's another aspect to that, which is that just as we find it sometimes quite hard to receive compliments or even love, we're sort of like drawn to people who reject us. We sort of, I don't know if you do that, but you kind of go after the negative. It's like, I'm going to win you round. So far from like accepting connection where there is. So like there's a connection there between us. I notice in myself that, if I reach out to somebody who backs away, oh my God, I will go after them so fast.
But why is that? Why do we do that? Because I do that. Firstly, I have a huge fear of rejection, massive. And I think I have the fear of rejection. I mean, typically, my therapist would say it's because you went through a divorced family and you went to boarding school and all these different things, and perhaps that is what it is. And I have a huge fear of rejection, but I think I had that since birth. I always wanted to be accepted. I always wanted to be a center of attention. I always wanted to be loved and cuddled and kissed. And as a child, my mum used to say, Jamie, kids normally shy away. If a stranger came, I said, oh, give me a cuddle. I would run and give them a cuddle.
Maybe, I mean, there is a kind of evolutionary explanation that, we are all the descendants of people who were part of a tribe that did look out for each other. So, that idea that when we were in the savannah, it was a matter of life and death to be accepted and to be part of this tribe. So I don't know, maybe one explanation is you might be on that kind of extreme end of that natural human instinct.
I think I must be, because anyone, like you said, anyone who rejects me, and typically the rejection used to happen it started with friends, because I wanted to be the most popular and this and that. And then it moved into girlfriends. And I remember I got broken up with once by a girlfriend. She was called Daisy. God, I loved her so much. And she broke up with me. And Daisy, you fool. And I got on my hands and knees, and I did that very cool thing, which guys do sometimes, all women do, which I begged for her back. I said, no, I want to be with you forever. And she said, this is really lame. And my tears were dropping onto her plimsolls. And I thought, this is really, it was the rejection. It was the rejection that wanted, it's like being not given a chocolate bar and all you want is a chocolate bar. That's what it felt like. That.
But just rewinding, so when you were talking about your childhood, you said it was like right there from the get-go, but was there any story of people rejecting you? I mean, did you feel rejected by your parents on some level? I mean, and that's a really difficult to say, because, we all actually kind of love our parents as well, but I don't know.
Yeah. I think, what do I think? I said this to my mum the other day. Whenever we used to go skiing as kids. And when we went skiing, I was sent to ski school. And, I was sent to boarding school at the age of 8 years old. And I'm very close to my mum. I'm very close to my dad. They're great parents in lots of different ways. They did get divorced when I was about 8 years old. But, I think they'll admit this themselves. My parents were selfish. They wanted to do what they wanted to do. And they loved their children. They paid for a nanny. So we had a nanny called Julie who looked after us. But they wanted to live their lives and children were just there. And so I definitely, without them meaning to, because they were very loving, I definitely got a sense of rejection because we were always sent off to do things, sent off to different schools, sent off to ski schools. It sounds so privileged, it's frightening, but that was my sort of experience, all these different things. And I definitely think that resonated a sense of rejection within me for sure.
I totally get that because so my husband also went off to boarding school. In fact, he went to Summerfields as well.
Did he go to Summerfields?
Yeah.
No ways.
Yeah. In fact, his family was his great grandfather was one of Mrs. McLaren's founding boys. So she was one of the 8 boys that actually started this. For listeners that don't know, Summerfields is this kind of grand prep school in Oxford, and it was sort of originally for people from the colonies. And my husband's great grandfather was sent from India when he was 5.
Wow.
But what I was going to say
is that is such a small world. That's such an amazing connection.
I know.
That's a bizarre connection.
Yeah,
that is a bizarre connection.
Yeah. It's like Jung. He thought, you had these moments of connection. Yeah, but what I was going to say is that, of course, you could write a story that you're a bit rejected because, if you're sent away somewhere else, it's kind of like, well, hang on, if my parents love me so much, why didn't they just want to have me around and keep me at home? So, I think it's kind of a pretty understandable narrative that you might have come up with.
Yeah, and totally. And in some cultures, we know that children sleep with the mother until they're about 6 years old. I mean, they literally sleep, in Indian culture, they sleep in the same bed as them sometimes, until they're about 6. And at 8 years old, I was sort of sent off and I hated it.
Yeah, I get that.
I got reminded the other day. So I have ADHD. So my concentration is terrible in lots of different ways, but it's also like a magical gift because it means I can think about 400 things at once and come up with different ideas. And so I love it. But, being a child with ADHD and running around and screaming and breaking windows and doing all these different things and being a nightmare that I was, sending them off to a boarding school probably isn't the best thing because I needed sort of love and attention all the time, and actually sort of handing me off somewhere and being restricted, which I was at Summerfields at boarding school. You had wake up hours, you had work hours, everything was structured,
organized and rigorous.
Oh my God, it's like for me, it was like being in handcuffs. And all I wanted to do was escape and run in the mud and be naked. That's what I wanted to do. And I wasn't allowed that. So it was very tough for me.
Yeah. But Jamie, sort of, have you managed to kind of like rewrite that story now, or how? Because it's something I'm always working on. I mean, I'm still really big on rejection. It's sort of like, if I send somebody an email and then they don't reply for 3 days, I'm like catastrophic. It's like, oh my God, I've done something wrong. I've offended them, blah, blah, blah. And then I'll, or if I'm not included in a party or an event, and so I'm really working all the time on, recognizing that narrative. And actually, the therapist I work with, she's got this thing that actually no one can reject you. We reject ourselves. So, and I think we started on this conversation about this idea, your main relationship was with yourself. So in those moments when that rejection sort of flares up, I try and say, okay, that's that old story. We know that story, where it might have come from. It's not serving me now. And it's just a story, which tells us that it's not true. It's a thought and a story. So again, back to evolution, we're all storytelling people. And then I sort of, sit with the very strong feeling. So what we resist persists. So I try and sort of allow that really horrible feeling of rejection, and then sort of tell myself this distant story, which is no, I'm not rejected. I connect with lots of people. I don't need to tell myself this story anymore. anyway, I'm really interested. What do you do when that kind of flares, you know, when you're triggered in that way?
Yeah, well, I think there's a few things that I do. Firstly, I don't envy your generation. I envy your generation in lots of different ways, but I think your generation was very tricky with acceptance, and it was a different time due to therapy and mental health and all these different things. So stuff wasn't spoken about. And I suppose when my mental health started kicking off, and in a sort of brief synopsis, is that I had a panic attack when I was about 22 years old. I was always an anxious kid, I think, but I didn't know it. But I had a panic attack at 22 years old, didn't know what it was, thought I was dying, the typical thing, went to hospital, got to the hospital, said, I'm dying, I'm having a heart attack. And he said, no, don't worry, it's a panic attack. Go and have a Coca-Cola and go home. So I went, what? Your terrible advice. So I went and had a Coca-Cola, went home, lay in bed. And the next day I woke up and it was like my world had changed in a light switch. I mean, I had GAD, general anxiety disorder. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't speak about it. I was this outgoing, confident, well, underneath it, very not confident, but on the surface, confident. I was doing a TV show, which is called Made in Chelsea. I'd picked this career, which people had told me not to do, but then I was in it and I hadn't taken the job offer that I had. So all these things were going on in my head and I had to pretend everything was okay. And I didn't talk about it for 6 months. And then one time in the shower, I was standing in the shower and it was like I was trying to draw breath every single day. I was just trying to get through the day. And I said to myself out loud, what is wrong with me? I went, what is wrong with you? What is wrong with you? And it was the first time I'd said it out loud and I cried and I phoned my mum and I said, Mum, I'm not very well. I don't know what's wrong with me. I feel like I'm an alien. And she said, okay, she took me to the doctor, a guy called Simon Moore. And he said, Jamie, you have anxiety. And I said, what is that? He said, your body feels like it's under attack. The saber-toothed tiger is at the door and you're scared it's there. Your adrenaline is through the roof. And I went, well, how do I get rid of it? What do I do to get rid of it? And he said, time. And I went, well, that's not good enough. And in my age or in our generation, we're so used to instant fixes. Take a drink, you get drunk. Go on YouTube, you get entertained. You can take drugs that make you euphoric. Everything happens like that. And for me, I couldn't understand the concept that if my mind was broken, why it couldn't be fixed straight away. I was offered medication. I decided I didn't want that. I didn't want any of that because I'm not a guy who takes medication. And so I just sat with this issue of anxiety. And the anxiety then continued pretty ferociously until I was about 28 years old. And at 27 years old, I had something called depersonalization, which is, for anyone listening who doesn't know what that is, it's where your body pretty much goes into autopilot because they've had too much stress, anxiety, PTSD, trauma, depression, whatever it may be. And your brain goes, well, enough is enough. And the only way to describe it, it feels like you're floating. Every day you feel like you're in a dream and you almost see yourself from your outside point of view. And so I thought I was then going mad. And then I realized that I had to get help. I said, I can't pretend this facade anymore. So I went and saw a therapist, someone called Malini Khan, who is a wonderful woman, who told me about lots of things about anxiety. I maybe understand different things, made me realize that it was okay to be the way I was. She was very heavily into CBT, cognitive therapy, CBT, cognitive behavior therapy. That's it. Which is basically where you would say, okay, I'm not going to get that job. Okay, but if you don't get that job, does that matter? Well, maybe it does matter because then, and I would catastrophize and everything. And she'd teach me to not catastrophize. And for me, what I do now, because I hate rejection, I'm the same as you in my long-winded answer, where I message people and they don't reply and I freak out. I now know in my head, the hardest thing to do when it comes to your mental health, whatever that may be, it could be anxiety, it could be insomnia, is accepting it. Acceptance is the hardest thing personally I've had to do because I never wanted to accept it. As soon as we accept our makeup is what it is, that is the road to recovery. Someone once said to me, you'll never get rid of anxiety. And I went, what do you mean I'll never get rid of it? Of course I will. I said, you won't, but you'll learn to live with it. That's kind of the hardest thing to hear, but also the best. And it's true. I have anxiety. I still do. I have issues in that area. I have issues with rejection, whatever it is. But I've learned through techniques and therapy and things that to accept things. So when I do feel the sense of rejection, or I do feel that, oh God, maybe I've pissed them off or whatever it is, I go inside my own head and I say, is that a rational thought? and I say, is this
Yeah.
rational right now? Is it real, or is it me making it up? Have they
Yeah.
said anything to make me feel that, or am I just thinking it
Yeah.
up? And
Like,
if
where's the evidence?
where's the evidence? I look for
Yeah.
the evidence, and if I go, there's no evidence, say, well, Jamie, you're just anxious. Remember, you got anxious, you got anxiety, just accept it. And I go, oh, okay, fine. And that makes me feel better.
That's so lovely. I think, yeah, I love that idea of kind of, I think you mentioned this idea of like, it's almost like acceptance. It's like you've got a backpack, and then when you accept it, you've put it down, and you that there's a sort of tremendous sense of, even as you were saying acceptance, I was feeling a kind of relief.
Yeah.
Because when I was hearing your story, I kind of, I think of your, any kind of empathy, you feel that pain, it's so painful in a way. And, as you know, I've had my own dramas. So, but yeah, there's a kind of whoosh of kind of relief of acceptance. And I suppose it's underpinned so many of the great religions as well, doesn't it? A kind of,
yes.
Also, even you could push it one step further, that it's actually not just acceptance, which has almost got a slightly kind of defeatist feel, maybe, but it's almost like, almost not quite a superpower, but maybe it was meant to be.
Completely.
Because, that sensitivity, which is part of maybe feeling so deeply, which maybe is part of the profile of either feeling anxious or depressed, it gives you a sensitivity to people, and it gives you a kind of understanding. I mean, I often think that about my own depression. I feel like I get emotional. What is it, Jamie? Mate, talking to you get
That's
me
okay. Getting emotional is a great thing, though. Honestly, it is.
Accept
and
it.
To be authentic and real is a real superpower. So be emotional and be vulnerable. It's the greatest thing.
So I feel it's a bit like I was given this passport, and I got this passport to go to this other country. And a bit like you, I had a very privileged life, but not a privileged health. And it's sort of like, because of what's happened, I've got to go into this other world. And that is a real privilege, and a kind of, you just see, you meet, obviously with some of the work with the charities, other people in this situation. And there's something incredibly reassuring. Maybe that's why I feel this connection, is because we are not alone.
Completely. And that's exactly it. And I think it's one of these. Also, I think I should, it's very easy to say, from my point of view, just accept it. Someone's like, when you're in the thick of it, when you're in the trenches, and or you're in the desert and the sun is beating down on you, it's very hard to accept it. Same with mental health. So when you're in the thick of depression, you're in the thick of anxiety or whatever it is, you can't see the wood from the trees, if that's the saying. You can't see the blue sky above the cloudy day. You can't, and you don't even think it's there. You don't even think it's there. And that's why the most awful thing, I think, is why there's such a case of suicides, especially in young men, is because they start experiencing anxiety, depression, whatever it may be, and they don't realize they can get through it. And so what they do is then they awfully take their own lives, because they think that's the only option, because they're never going to get through it. And actually, I was lucky enough to get through it. So you realize you can get through it. And my acceptance, I suppose, really actually came from another problem that I had. I have tinnitus, which is a constant ringing in the ears. It's constant ringing in the ears. And very boringly, for quick explanation, it's where the hair follicles in the ear have been broken due to noise, whatever it may be. And it's constantly sending a signal to your brain, you're hearing a certain noise. And I had this, and it started, and I honestly wanted to put my head in front of a train. I was like, I can't live with this. But then someone told me, I went to the doctor, and they said, look, Jamie, you're going to have to treat it like aircon in the room. When you hear crickets at night when you're abroad, or you're on an airplane, you can hear the airplane. It's there, you can hear it, but your brain cuts it out. If you were constantly thinking about the aircon in the room, you'd stay awake, but you cut it out. That's the same with tinnitus. Learn to accept it. And so after a year or so, I slowly learned to accept tinnitus was there. And if I think now I can hear it, but I know it's there and it's fine. That taught me that as soon as you start accepting things, you can get past them. So my tinnitus taught me to accept other things in my life, rejection, anxiety, whatever it may be, because actually, if I accepted tinnitus and that got better, surely that would be the equation to the other things. So actually, it was my tinnitus that helped me through.
Yeah. And, actually, and I want to come on to sort of more strategies, like actual ways of, I suppose, different perspectives, rethinking a little bit, like we've been talking about acceptance, but just sort of staying with acceptance for one last idea, which is, I think the other thing that's helped me a lot is that it's also helped me accept other people and not try and change them and not try and control them. And that has actually made my other relationships way more relaxing. So it's not just about kind of like accepting your own psychological reality, but it's also sort of giving space to people around you to let them be who they are and not try and control them. And I don't think my husband's going to be listening in, so that's fine. But, you know, I realized that my earlier method was much more trying to kind of control and grip and change. Like, I've got to get on top of this. And actually, I was also quite controlling to those around me. And my relationship has just been so much more relaxing, also with the children, when I've just kind of gone for much more, you know, they've got their psychological reality and I need to accept that. And I'm not trying to change them. I don't know if you found that in your kind of wider relationships.
Yeah, I definitely did. I definitely, I was in my 20s, I was a complete nightmare because I was,
I didn't believe it.
no, I was, oh my God, I was a nightmare. And it was a nightmare for lots of reasons. I mean, you could use that excuse, but I was a nightmare because I was going through anxiety and different things, but I drank too much. I was dating different people. I was on a TV show. I thought I was famous. I thought all these different things. And so I was a complete chaotic nightmare. And I rejected family, friends, all these different things. And I couldn't understand why people didn't think the same as me. So when I didn't want to turn up to Christmas because I wanted to be in Barbados with my friends and my mum was upset, I didn't understand because I wasn't upset. So why would you be upset? I couldn't get over that. So I was like, why does it matter? Why do you care? And she'd be like, because I care, because I want to see my son. Yeah, but it's okay, but I'll see you another time. So I thought that in my head. And so for many years, what I used to do is I used to try and I used to believe that people behaved how I behaved and acted how I behaved and thought how I behaved. And so therefore, when other people didn't think like me, I try to change their thought process or try to make them more like me.
Oh, right. And so get over it, mum. You know, it's no big deal kind of thing.
It's no big deal kind of thing. And then what I realized is actually I became far more self-aware. And I realized that everyone is an individual and everyone is human. Yeah. Everyone has different emotions, whatever that may be. And actually, you kind of got to accept people for who they are, not try and change them, but allow them to be who they are and just understand them. And so now, instead of trying to change or reject or push people or adapt or tell people how to do things, I'm much more of a listener than I was a talker. I'm still a hell of a talker, but I actually listen a bit more now and I appreciate people for who they are and don't just
I like that. I always like the idea that, you know, we've got 2 ears, 1 mouth, so listen twice as much as we talk.
Yeah,
so, you know, get that proportion. But yeah, and you could even maybe push it one step further, that actually, isn't that interesting that people are different? I mean, how boring would it be if we were all exactly the same? I've had to learn this a lot actually with my husband in terms of bringing up children, which I'm sure will be, you know, something headed your way soon. But you know, that my way of being a parent is my way of being a parent. And I used to think, you know, and I used to sort of jump in if I felt that he was parenting in a way that I didn't necessarily agree. So very broadly, I was more liberal. He was a bit more sort of strict. And then I realized that actually these different points of view were really helpful for the children. Yes. And in fact, you don't want to be this phalanx of these 2 parents who are exactly the same, because then that's actually pretty scary for the child, because they can't see that there are different ways of seeing and believing and feeling. And yes. I'm one way and he's different. And that's okay. And they're different again. So I suppose I'm pushing it one step further, that it's even that actually it can be really fun to see how different people are.
Well, I think that's exactly it. I think especially when it comes to children, that's probably the ultimate test for any couple or anyone, any marriage, whatever it may be, any individual. I see it now with one of my friends who have had kids. Kids are a wonderful thing, but wow, they seem to be a real responsibility and it changes your whole life. And I think that is the real moment when you have to become a team and you accept it. You know, that's why, you know, you look at, I always talk the Welsh rugby team, right? The Welsh rugby team in the World Cup or the Welsh football team in the World Cup in 2000, I don't get this wrong, 16 or whatever it was. And they got to the semi-final, I think it was. They weren't the best team. They didn't have the best play. I mean, they didn't have the best players. They didn't have the best coach. They didn't have lots of different things, but they were the greatest team together. They they backed each other up, they supported, they respected, they looked after, they saw everyone's minor negatives and made them the positives. And they built a team that was the ultimate team. And I think that's what you kind of have to do, you know, with my, I hate the word, but fiance, I never call her that, but she tells me sometimes to call her that. With my fiance now, we have arguments and we have disagreements and we have lots of different things. And life is hard and I'm a nightmare and all these different things, but actually it's about accepting one another and being sure that you understand one another. And especially when it comes to kids, you realize that her parenting might be different to mine, but that's okay. But as long as we try and get some synergy together, then it's going to be all right. And it's about finding those ways through.
Sure. And inevitably you will be different because you were parented differently. So you'll have a different experience before you even start. So yeah, no, I like it.
It was wild though for me just to find out that people were different. I thought everyone was the same. And we're not, we are all different.
So the way I think about teams, which I found really helpful in terms of relationships, it's almost like if you think of a Venn diagram, that each of us are like a sort of sphere, okay? And you know, we have our own identity and our own sort of psychological reality, but these two spheres can come together in the middle and overlap. But not everything has to overlap. And of course, not everything can overlap. I mean, it's impossible for it to, but you can come together and have fun and have a kind of joyful interaction and work together on that kind of overlap. But what I don't like is the kind of narrative in lots of sort of, you know, well, pretty much all of history that, you know, there's this guy on a white charger and he kind of, you know, rides along and picks you up and then he sorts you out and you're happy ever after. I don't think that's the way that, for me, relationships have, you know, they're much happier when I, you know, keep a sort of separate identity. It's nobody's rescuing anybody, even though that's so much the romantic sort of idyll that we're sold as women. But we do come together in this sort of team.
Well, I was always in relationships where it was a codependent relationship. And I think a lot of people fall victim to them. I'm sure a lot of listeners relate to that, where you almost can't live without the other person. And that's actually a really negative way to be. And I was always told it's like a circle. You want to be a circle, right? But you don't want to be two circles connected to each other. Because when you break
one on top of each other.
Yeah, you're one on top of each other. You don't want because if you're two circles connected, when you pull apart from each other, you both have holes in you. And then you're not a full circle anymore. And so what you want to do is be one on top of each other, as you said, because actually you're bringing two lives together. You're not becoming one life. And I always thought that you couldn't be independent in a relationship, but actually being independent in a relationship is one of the most important things to be. You want to go and live your life. They should go and live their lives. But when you come together, you have an amazing life together. So you almost have sort of two lives that you live. And that's what's so wonderful.
You're lucky because, okay, so I'm, as I don't know, you know, I'm in my 50s, okay, so I'm on this stuff, okay. I too am really onto codependence, and I am really still working on it. Like I find it, you know, like I'm still seeking approval, and like if my husband's in a bad mood, I'm thinking, oh God, it's my fault. What have I done wrong? Blah, blah, blah. I'm still trying to keep that sense that, you know, I don't have to peg my mood off his mood. But I think you're lucky, Jamie, because you're onto this stuff pretty young. You know, I mean, you know, I mean, I got to it later than you. And so, you know, I think it's so great that you're, how old are you now? Pretty young, right?
33, yeah.
Okay, so so basically.
But I knew this at sort of, I'm 29, I started realizing it.
Okay. So I suppose I had my first break time when I was 33, in early 30s, but then I was in complete denial for ages. And then I had to have a whole nother bloody second breakdown. And then I had to be ill for years. And so it took me ages. I mean, I think maybe that's a really nice generational shift, is that, you know, there's a feeling with younger people that there's so much more awareness, and you get onto this stuff and, you know, you get the help. You know, we are both lucky. We have, and I know that's something we've talked about, is how little help is out there, but there's something very positive in that you're onto this stuff pretty young.
Yeah, but that brings you back to my first comment, which is I admire your generation in lots of different ways, and otherwise I don't, because you guys couldn't learn this young. You couldn't, because it wasn't around.
Yeah, that's true.
There is also a problem though that we have, I think, that and my sister is amazing and I love her, but she has her issues and she speaks about them. And she sort of has issues, you know, she's been depressed in the past, and she's all these different things, but she wears it almost as a badge. And
Right.
she's and I think for me, and I say this to her, that is wrong. Because what happens is she will say, well, I have depression. And she says it almost, well, these are the reasons I act this way because of that. And I don't think that's a fair assumption to give. You know, with someone like yourself who has had depression, or me who have been through low moods and stuff like that, we're always trying to improve ourselves. We want to try and improve ourselves in different ways and get better and understand ourselves. And what happens with my little sister is that she almost accepts it and then doesn't want to do anything about it because she thinks, how unfair that I have this. And so therefore, this is who I am and this is my makeup. And I think there's a problem with the younger generation, perhaps, where they almost sometimes just accept it. They get told this is what they have, and then they don't want to improve it as much. And I think my little sister's a little bit like that. That's
interesting. So we're refining the let's just accept it model with let's accept it, but also find ways of managing and find strategies.
Absolutely.
Which neatly brings me, I have to say, that was quite, yeah.
That was a great segue.
Yeah, you know, look out, you know, the Today Show. I will quickly be taking my place. But yes, so accepting, but also managing. And so
yes,
just tell me a bit more about the, you know, your own ways of managing, and, you know, how what other things do you do? You know, we talked about that moment of you know, some of the cognitive behavioral therapy work, so not so much what's happening, but how you look at it.
Yeah.
But are there other sort of shifts in perspective or really practical things that help?
For sure. And I just think I want to touch on that acceptance part, because it's very much like saying to someone, okay, you're dyslexic, which I'm dyslexic, right? You're dyslexic, that's why you're bad at spelling. And you just go, okay, fine, I'm now bad at spelling. So if I spell badly, then that's fine. Doesn't really matter because I got dyslexia. But with me, I was like, okay, I've got dyslexia. That means I'm not great at spelling, but I'm still going to try and improve my spelling because I want it to do. And I think that you should look at that in terms of your mental health. If you have insomnia or depression or anxiety, and it is a beast to deal with, it is awful. Yeah. You should accept it, but try and improve it. And there are so many ways that you can improve it. Don't just go, well, that's just the way, that's my makeup. I'm plagued with it forever. Don't do that. And it's sometimes quite easy to do that. And there's lots of things that I do to help it. Firstly, I'm very fortunate to be able to have therapy once a week. And if it was, you know, if I had the ability to do it, I would say that everyone should have therapy. I think it's a marvelous thing to have, and the self-awareness you achieve from it. So I do that. The other thing that I do to really help myself is I expose myself to situations. So I get OCD sometimes, and that's typically with someone with anxiety, they get OCD. And my OCD can range from not walking across 3 drains because I think someone's going to die, or to shutting the door wrong and I have to run down the stairs and open it and shut it again. You know, that's my OCD sometimes. And actually what you want to do in those situations is you want to expose yourself to them. So when you do shut the door wrong and you think, oh God, I'm going to shut again, don't go and shut it. See what happens. It's a nightmare in your body. You obsess over it. Or if you're scared about walking over 3 drains because you think the world's going to end, walk over the 3 drains and expose yourself to the situation. And I had it where I had social anxiety for a while because I did a TV show Made in Chelsea. I thought every situation I had to go into, whether it was on TV or real life, it was a scene. So I had to be as loud.
A siege.
A scene from the. So I thought I was in a TV show all the time. So I thought that I had to be really hyper and, hey, how you doing? And whoa, and yeah, what? And make jokes and all these things all the time. And I could never have an off switch. Exhausting. Yeah. And so I would then have social anxiety because I thought that if I went for lunch with my friends and I didn't entertain them or make them laugh or have a great time, then my Uber rating at the end from them would be a 0. And then that I would lose a friend, and then the rejection would come in. So what I would then not go and see my friends all the time. So then I became lonely. And actually what I realized is I had to expose myself to those situations. So I'd organize a one-on-one lunch. As much as I hated doing it, I would just go and do it. I would have the lunch. And at the end of the lunch, I'd go, well, that wasn't that bad. Okay, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. And then I would keep doing that. So exposing yourself to situations that you think are going to cause you harm or distress or anxiety or whatever it may be is really important. The other one that I really think is a great thing to do is exercise.
Mm-hmm.
And people really don't understand the power of exercise. It can be from walking to your local shop, to going on a 10-minute run, to doing a 10K. I think something like that, starting exercise, however small it may be, is wonderful. I remember when I was feeling so crap and I decided to go to a spin class when I was about 27, when I had depersonalization. I walked out of there and I went, oh my God, I feel like I'm 18 again. And I remember thinking it was the first time ever. And I was like, wow, this thing. So exercise, I think, is really and truly key. And then the other thing, which I think is really important, is being vulnerable, being close, being open to your friends and family. I have a great friend of mine called Toby Wilkinson, who's actually going to be one of my best men at my wedding. And I never told anyone that I was feeling crap. I told my mum and my family, but kept everything a bit close. And I was going through a really bad stage of feeling incredibly low, and I was completely burnt out and all these different things. And I phoned him up and he said, hi. And I went, hi, buddy. And I started crying. And he went, what's the matter? And I said, but I just feel so crap. I feel so low at the moment. And I didn't know what his response was going to be. And he said, don't worry, we'll go through this together. And when you say that to one of your friends or one of your families, you typically get an echo back. You really do. And if you don't get an echo back, you should probably change your friends or your family, because that's not a good thing to do. And
I'm sure you probably know the work by Brené Brown on vulnerability.
No, I don't. Tell me.
Oh, you'd love her. She's called Brené Brown, Brene, and she's pretty big in America, and she's got this whole thing that vulnerability elicits connection and actually our humanity. And actually she's like super duper successful TED Talk type.
Brené Brown,
yeah.
And she says that it's about being vulnerable.
Yeah. She says that allowing our vulnerability also leads to our connection, and it's our humanity, and it's our kind of common humanity, and that's how we kind of feel connected. I'd really love you to watch that. Let me know what you think about it.
I'm going to. I've just written it down. I'm gonna watch it straight afterwards. I always say to everyone, vulnerability is key. Be vulnerable. It's an amazing thing. It sets you free, and other people connect with you.
Yeah, I've been trying that a bit as well. Like instead of back to kind of trying to control other people, or is just to stay with how you feel. So, if I don't know, if I ask one of the children to go out for a coffee and they say no, yeah, I can accept it. But I might also say, look, I'm not trying to force an outcome, but I do feel a little bit sad when you don't want to have a coffee with me. And they go, oh, okay, mom, I'll come. A little bit like you weren't able to have that kind of more real conversation with your mom before, but you probably are now, because she's got her vulnerability too. So that's kind of probably rather lovely that you've got a closer connection.
That's exactly. And it's scary because you don't know what response you're going to get. And I said that again to one of my friends once, when boy humor is very much making fun of each other and just doing this, and it's hard, and joshing each other. And I went out for a few dinners with my buddies, and it was just it became so negative that it wasn't pleasant to be there. And I said to my friend, after he said, are you all right? You kind of left the other night. This is about a couple of years ago. And I said, do you know what, buddy? I'm all about for having fun, but I just find that all we do is take the piss out of each other. And then the night ends with everyone getting drunk, and that's about it. And it doesn't seem that fun. And to be honest, I'm bored of it.
Yeah.
And he responded saying, I'm so sorry. I agree with you. I don't think it's nice. And since then, it's been amazing. And I think you just have to take that plunge sometimes to sort of say to your friends, your family, that, this is what you're feeling. And as soon as you do that, as soon as you put them on the back foot, they go, oh God, whoa, whoops. Because we're all human. We all have emotions. We're all this and that. And I think you put it onto them.
I think it's very interesting that how humor can be distancing. It's a kind of, it isn't kind of, you see it sometimes in Asian cultures that people would rather, they laugh, but it actually keeps you quite far away from someone.
Yeah. Totally.
And also sometimes, humor can be cruel. It sometimes is working very close to actually being unkind.
Yes.
And so I get that sort of, watching out too much for the kind of bro Joshy. I mean, maybe
completely.
The cliche is that women are a bit better at opening up and being more vulnerable, and
of course,
men are not so good, but then women aren't so good at being angry. That's the sort of idea. We can't. We want to be nice, nice and nice women, blah. So we can't voice our
My
anger.
girlfriend is angry. She gets angry very easily. So I think she takes it up.
Because, you know, sometimes the people say depression's anger turned in, whatever.
I know they do say that, because then if you don't, yeah, exactly. If you're not angry and you just keep it in, then depression is, anger turned in, exactly.
Well, back to being authentic and sort of limiting your self-expression, so that, or even what you were saying about the sort of mismatch between your reality and how you're projecting. And so that's really exhausting, because you've got the two identities, and you know, you're having to pretend to one identity when you're actually got another one. So, you know, if you can put the two together. So I say, in a similar way with anger, if you're actually quite angry about something but pretending to be fine about it, that's quite an exhausting way.
Totally.
My learning on that, though, is to share, but not in the exact moment of being angry.
Yeah, you want to sit on it for a bit. Never send the email at night time. Always send it the next morning.
Yeah, I think when we're really captured by a very strong feeling like anger, you know, we're often quite dumb. And we can make, you know, that whole business about the brain. So the three parts of the brain, and there's this the neocortex is the thinking brain, and then we've got, which is the more modern brain, and then there's the old brain, which is the limbic brain and the reptilian brain. So people say that the front bit of the brain is like the wise owl brain, and then there's the limbic brain, which is more the emotional brain, which is like the baboon brain, you might think of, and then there's the reptilian brain, which is the fear, flight, stress response brain. So that's like the lizard. So the lizard, the baboon, and
the owl,
the wise owl, that's it. So when we're in those very strong emotions, we're in our old brain. And so we want to come down and wait, and then you know, don't deny that emotion, but use your wise owl brain to have a kind of sensible conversation.
Wow, that's so interesting. I love that.
Yeah, it's just, I often think, oh, you know, a little bit like you with that self-awareness of the rejection or whatever. It's like, oh, okay, which bit of my brain am I in right now? Okay, so my old brain has gone crazy, but let's just
bring it back and just, oh, I love that. That's a great thought.
Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah, but it's really interesting, your two other strategies. So yeah, exposure therapy, which is like gold standard. And actually, I think a lot of people finding it helpful coming out of lockdown, which is, you know, they haven't been out a lot, they're quite nervous still, you know, but just little by little, you know, you're frightened even to go to the shop, but you let yourself walk to the shop, then you walk back. The next day,
exactly,
you go into the shop. The third day, you buy something in the shop. You know, the fourth day, you have a conversation with the shopkeeper. And that's in some of my workshops, people are finding that like exposure therapy super helpful. Do you know what? I'm going to try it a bit more myself of things that I find haunting. Yeah, I
honestly, just do it. There's like, and sometimes what we do, I think, Rachel, is that I will go, okay, smallest example is, okay, fine, I'm not going to bring my phone into my bedroom at night. And then the next night I bring my phone into bed and go, oh, I'll just do it tomorrow night. We put things off. But actually, if we stand here and say, right, I'm going to do that. I'm going to expose myself to that situation today. You actually just go and do it. And that's what I'm doing more of, when I'll say things like, okay, I need to spend less time on social media. I'm going to do it right now. Act now. Do it now.
Okay.
Don't, because
that's really interesting, because there's a shift in psychology on that, because and actually a lot of psychological research keeps changing. Like, oh, it's another conversation, but we used to think self-esteem was a good idea. That's out the window now. There's problems with the self-esteem model in psychology. There's also, in terms of motivation, you're absolutely right. So the old psychological model was more, let's plan, you know, I'm going to go and take this exercise class, you know, let's get all prepared, etc. You know, fail to prepare, prepare to fail. Now psychologists think it's the other way around.
Really?
You don't wait for motivation. It, you know, it may never come. It's the other way around. You do it, and then the motivation comes second.
Oh my God, this, because I think otherwise the easiest option is to procrastinate. Is that the right word? So that's the easiest option to do, to put things off. And you can say that, okay, well, I'm going to go to a lecture first and listen to that, or I'm going to go and watch the new. That's the easiest option. The hardest option is to just do it right now. And so take the hard option. The easy option is to pick up the alcohol, the drug again, and do it. The harder option is to give it up, right? That's why there's so many drug addicts and alcoholics. So if you have a thing that you want to change and you want to act, do it now. Don't plan it, just do it. And then you can then you learn from the mistakes, and then you do it again. You do it again. And it's repetition that actually heals you, I think.
Yeah. I'm really going to take kind of going out of my comfort zone, because that I'm not really doing that at all at the moment. And exercise, look, you know, of course we all know it, it's like,
I know.
it's like a mild antidepressant. It's like,
I know.
the difference. I struggle. I mean, I walk, okay, but I don't do enough. I really don't. I mean, I love it when I do it, and I just don't know why I find it so hard. It's such an obvious thing.
Yeah, but also I was very sporty when I was a kid, so I'm sort of conditioned to be quite sporty. So I find it easy to do it. Other people just don't.
Yeah.
The biggest one, and I kid you not, and it sounds so bizarre. And I had Wim Hof on my podcast.
Oh yeah, amazing.
And he spoke about cold therapy, having a cold shower.
Yeah.
I thought it was nonsense. And I then started having a cold shower every morning, 2 minutes, freezing cold. It was horrible. I hated it. For me, it's life-changing. The anxiety's down, the stress levels are down, I sleep better.
And hang on, how does that link with the exercise?
It doesn't. That's the substitute to the exercise. So
if I don't
if I don't exercise, I definitely 100% have a cold shower.
Oh, really?
And it shocks the system like exercise does, and it raises those endorphins. And you have to, with the cold shower, you do it once. After about a month of doing it every single morning for a month, you will suddenly go, oh, I'm not as stressed as before. And you go, it can't be because of the cold shower. Surely not. But it is.
So the only thing I've done recently, which has helped, and this sounds so trivial, but often that's how change happens, is we've got a cupboard by the front door, and I've put my trainers in the cupboard. And it just means that, there's one less barrier to getting out because I've got the trainers there. And then the other thing is my daughter, not the one you met, Catherine, but my other daughter, Charlotte, she made me this really motivational playlist. And, if I've got that playlist going, I do get that kind of rush. And then the last thing that I do is that I'm always short on time, because I've got a busy life. Actually, we could unpack that, what does that mean? But I like exercising when I've got to do something else. So, I will bicycle, to meet somebody, half an hour. I've got my music going, I've got my trainers, and then I'm outside, which is another big thing for me.
So there's this book called Atomic Habits. I don't know if you've come across it. Oh my Lord, Kira, you have to. It's called Atomic Habits. You can get it on.
You're doing Brené Brown, and
you're doing Atomic Habits. And Atomic Habits is a very interesting book, which is all about habits and how we make bad habits into good habits and create good habits, and how we do that. And actually, what we do, is we say they give an example of the British cycling team, where they're a pretty mediocre team. And so everyone who goes in cycling says, I want to win Olympic gold. Don't look at it like that. What you want to do is you say, well, I want to become the best cyclist. That's what I want to do. I want to be a better cyclist. So you change the 1% each time. And with you've done one of the Atomic Habits, which is a great thing, is that what you do is now every single time you put your trainers in the cupboard. Yeah. So therefore, your motivation is a little bit more. You change those little things that you want to change in your life. For example, if you think you're playing too much PlayStation, every single time you finish playing your PlayStation, put it in the cupboard. So actually it becomes a bit more of an effort to take it out of the cupboard and plug it back in. But then when you do it and change that little bit of habit, you will then see that your gaming or your PlayStation hours come down because it's more of an hour. So there's little habits in your life that you want to change for better. You just tweak them a little bit. And it takes time. It may take 6 months. It may take a year. It may take a year and a half. But over time, you become a better person in those ways. And it's just about changing a little thing. So if you want to suddenly start doing exercising, you really can't do it, start putting your trainers next to the door, and then every single time you see them, you put them on and you go on a walk. Then that walk helps you, and then slowly that becomes a jog, and then you start jogging. And it's not about saying I want to be fit as anything now. It's actually just going, no, I want to improve this slightly, and the little improvements create the biggest change.
I like it. How about the idea, something else I found helpful with habit changing is this kind of idea of lining up with what you really like. I know
I like that.
Obvious. But so, for example, with exercise, so one thing I read recently, which I thought really resonated, was that back to our evolutionary ancestors. So they didn't actually exercise in terms of going to the gym. They actually moved for two reasons. They were mainly sedentary. They did get up and down quite a lot, but they mainly sat around, which is actually true of all cultures, because we are designed to hang on to our calories. because then we're going to survive.
Survival.
So actually, the whole notion of exercise is kind of like not in our makeup, but we did move for two reasons. One was for joy. So stuff like celebrations, dancing. So that's why like the music makes a big thing for me, because, you know, there I am, I will survive. I got the music, and it's kind of that joyful thing. And the other thing that they did move, and I'm trying to do this as well, which is they did sudden bursts of really intense exercise. And maybe that's a bit like your shower, because like they suddenly saw a lion, so they really ran, or they were killing a bit of game. You know, they saw the deer and they had to run to get that spear in. So I do it, which is I'm actually kind of quite pottering along most of the time, but then I will, if I see a hill, I will bicycle up that hill.
That's a great idea.
Really kill me, but for a minute and a half, I am, you know, I'm like, and I've got in my head, this is me getting that deer. You know, this is,
yes, that's a great one. I love that.
So there's something about this idea of kind of, well, I mean, maybe I'm slightly going off piste here using a skiing analogy, but yeah, it's something about kind of lining up with what we like, but also what we're kind of naturally designed to do.
Totally. I think that's a great, and actually what they say when you do running or something like that, the small bursts of sprinting or stuff like that, it actually gets the best results. Yeah. So that's really interesting. I'm going to start doing that more and more. I think that's a great thing.
It's and you feel, you know, a little bit like your shower thing. You feel really, really good afterwards. Jamie, I can't believe it. An hour has just whizzed.
Thank you so much for having me. Was that all right? I thoroughly enjoyed it.
It was amazing. Of course it was amazing. And you don't mean me to tell you that.
Look at me trying to reach for the praise. I'm trying to reach
on the head, you know.
I'm trying to reach for the praise.
Yeah, you don't need to look for yourself where you're not. You don't need me. I don't need you to tell me I'm okay, and you don't need to tell me I'm okay. But it's kind of nice anyway.
That is so kind. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast.